Hey, welcome. In this segment, we're going to be talking about the off-site method for identifying wetlands. This method involves using existing information, mainly maps and aerial photographs, to get a sense of what are the land use, land covers, and potential for the site supporting wetlands. We have to realize that this method really is not a delineation method. It's an approach to really data gathering where we put together this information for getting a preliminary site assessment. In other words, knowing what kind of wetlands have been mapped in the area by various agencies or what kind of soil properties are present in that particular area. This type of procedure should be used before you go out in the field and do your actual delineation work, because it gives you perspective in terms of what other folks have found in terms of wetlands, soil properties, what the topography is like, and when you look at aerial photographs you get a sense of what type of land use and land cover are on that particular property. So it provides all that potential, that important background information that you need before you do your site assessment. There are two main sources of maps. One would be the National Wetland Inventory maps produced by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the other types of maps would be the soil survey maps that are available through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service. Before using any map, we have to realize there are limitations. First of all, these maps are produced by a combination of using aerial photography and interpreting those images, and then with a certain amount of field work. You'll find that the National Wetland Inventory maps utilize very little field checking, just mainly to check various wetland signatures, whereas the soil survey maps were produced by extensive on-the-ground field work by soil scientists. Regardless of the type of map that we're looking at, they all have limitations. There are limitations due to the methods employed, the scale and quality of the imagery, and for wetlands, the difficulty of identifying particular features. For example, it's very difficult to identify certain types of forested wetlands and some of the drier end wetlands through photo interpretation. Let's now review the National Wetland Inventory map data. National Wetland Inventory maps were produced by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and cooperating agencies through the National Wetland Inventory Program. The program has been mapping wetlands since the mid-1970s. Originally, the program produced hard copy maps at a scale of 1 to 24,000, or for Alaska, 1 to 63,350. These maps were produced primarily through photo interpretation of mid-altitude aerial photographs, and then transferring the results of those interpretations to match USGS topographic maps. However, in the mid-1990s, due to the advent of GIS technology and the actual cost of making, storing, and distributing hard copy maps, the National Wetland Inventory Program converted its data to digital products. So today, paper maps are a thing of the past. Currently, the NWI data, the only data that's available, is available in digital form. It's available in digital form for GIS applications and viewing on screen through a tool called the Wetlands Mapper. As of May 2014, digital data were available for the entire conterminous United States, Hawaii, and parts of Alaska. The mapper displays the NWI data on current imagery, or it can be displayed on general topographic map information, or a USGS topographic map. What we're going to do now is take a look at the Wetland Mapper. So we'll do a little demonstration to show you how it works. So you see the website there, and then we're going to click to it. The page that opens up is the Wetland Mapper page. Okay. What we want to do is go down to where you see the map of the United States, and there's a tab that says click here to open the Wetland Mapper. So we'll click there, and I've already done that, and we open the mapper. And you'll see a map of the United States. In this case, the whole map is covered with various shades of green because there's digital data available now for the entire United States. That happened as of May 2014. You'll note that up here there's a block that says Imagery and labels. That shows the data, NWI data on top of an aerial image. The topo here means that it's on a generalized topo map. If you clicked on that, then you would see the NWI data on a USGS topographic map. And it's scale dependent, so if you zoom in too close, you won't even see the topographic map. So you can also see the available data layers here. The one that's clicked on here is for wetlands. If you're interested in riparian habitats out in the west, they have some digital data available there. You can also find out information on the source of the imagery in terms of the type of imagery that's available, the approximate date of the imagery, to give you an idea of how current the data are. So let's now, what we'll do here is type in an address. Okay, we're going to type in an address, and we're going to zoom into that particular location. Okay, and then we'll click on this button here that says Find Location, and what should happen is that now we'll zoom into that particular area. So it zooms in. In this case, it brought us into the general area of Leverett, because maybe it couldn't find that particular address. And you can see there's a color coding here for water bodies and various types of wetlands. And if you were to actually click on a particular polygon, we see information in terms of the wetland type, the classification code, Palustrine Emergent Wetland, PEM1E, that's a seasonally flooded freshwater wetland. Basically, it's a marsh. And you can see the generalized term down here, type of wetland, freshwater emergent wetland. Tells you how big that particular area was. It gives you information in terms of the approximate date that the inventory was conducted. I mean, it's not really conducted as much as that's the effective date of the inventory based on the imagery that's available. True color, and it gives you information about the quads and so on. You can also find other information here, project metadata and historic map data. For that, you'd find maybe a report that was written about the wetland inventory in this particular area. So the important thing, though, is when you type in your address, it'll zoom into a particular area, and you can see what types of wetlands the National Wetland Inventory is mapped. Now, realizing that, photo interpretation doesn't allow you to identify all wetlands. There are certain types of wetlands that are basically difficult to identify, and these would be your drier end wetlands, and then certain types of forested wetlands. They would maybe more difficult to identify, particularly evergreen forested wetlands. And what we're going to do now is review the soil survey information that's available online. Okay? The soil survey data was published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Originally, the data were produced in a hard copy, map form, and they were attached to reports that we call soil survey reports. These are largely produced for counties across the country, and they had all this information in terms of soil properties, soil mapping units, various uses of soils. And at the back of those reports were a set of maps that showed the location of different types of soils based on the actual survey in the field by soil scientists. Again, it's a combination of photo interpretation and on-the-ground survey work. But now all the data, all their map data, are available online through this mapping tool called the Web Soil Survey. And when you go to the Soil Survey webpage, you'll see the thing that really pops out to you is that large green button. It says Start WSS. But besides that, I just want to show you a little bit of information that's also available. If you want to know official soil descriptions, you can see what's highlighted over here where I have the mouse that's blinking on and off a little bit. That's where you get the official soil descriptions for a particular soil. So if you wanted to know the various soil colors, textures, and so on through the horizons, you would go to that particular site. And so when you open the mapper, you'll find a map of the United States, just like you did with the National Wetland Inventory. And what we'll do is go in here, and what we want to do is type in an address. So there's an address already typed in here. You can see 1 Rattlesnake Gutter Road, Leverett, Massachusetts. So we can click on that, and then the mapper will take us to a particular area. This is where 1 Rattlesnake Gutter is. It's in Franklin County, Massachusetts. There's an area that's boxed out there. That's the area that we're interested in. And how we would get there is we would really put a box around through that area of interest, the AOI tool. And in order to see the map, what we have to do is click on this tab up here that says Soil Map. And so now the data are being processed, and we get a map that shows the different soil types in that particular area. And so if we look closely here, if we were to kind of zoom in, let me just move it around a little bit so we can see it in pretty good view. We'll look at a soil type 31A. 31A is on the property. In fact, you can see that there's this brook called Doolittle Brook that runs through that area. So that may be a good location for finding a wetland. Here we are. And what I'll do is I'll click on that particular soil. When we clicked on that particular soil map unit, 31A, then this table came into view. So we can look at that particular table and get some information on what its likelihood for being a wetland is. First, we want to look down here under properties and qualities. We're going to look under natural drainage class. And in this case, for this particular soil, the Walpole, it's a poorly drained soil. So in most cases, poorly drained and very poorly drained soils are going to be hydric soils. We can also look down below here. There's a couple other features that relate to possible wetness. This is the frequency of flooding or the frequency of ponding. When they talk about flooding, soil scientists usually mean overbank flooding along a river or a stream, as opposed to ponding, which would be water collecting in an isolated basin or just on a broad flat through precipitation, surface water runoff, or groundwater inflow. So we can get a sense already by looking at this particular soil series that this one is likely to be wetland. Okay, now let's click out of this particular map, and again you can see where that unit is. It lies within that area on either side of what's called Doolittle Brook. Now there's some other information that we can also get from the mapper, and that would be going to this Soil Data Explorer. If we go to the Soil Data Explorer, we'll see this category called Suitabilities and Limitations Ratings. Okay, so let's click on that. We want to go down to what's called Land Classification, so we'll open that up. And then we look down at the various categories there, and we can find one that says hydric rating by map unit. So if we click on that, we'll get a box here that says, well, we can view the description or we can view the rating. So what we want to do is, in this particular area, we want to see, well, where are the hydric soils according to this mapping effort. And the view rating, click on that, and then the map should appear. And in this case, the orange areas are areas of 31A, that Walpole series that are hydric soils. Now we have to keep in mind that yes, these have been mapped as hydric soils, but in some cases hydric soils have been drained, or in other cases the soil map unit also includes soils of a different type, which may or may not be hydric. But in any case, for this particular area, if this is the property that we're looking at, we have maybe 3 or 4 different types of soils in the area, and then we can go and look up descriptions of those soils through the soil survey official soil descriptions. And then that'll give us the actual soil properties that we may be encountering in the field. So what we'll do now is go back to the presentation there. We'll go to our next slide here, and we'll talk just a little bit about imagery. There are many sources of imagery that are available online. The one, perhaps the most popular, would be the imagery that's available through Google Earth. And Google Earth also has the ability to go back in time. They have archived aerial photographs going back probably to the somewhere around the 1990s. So you can look at even a time series of aerial photographs. The other sources would be Bing Maps, and there are various government agencies, state, local, and federal, that also have maps displayed online. Imagery is very valuable for determining the current condition of the land. For example, if you want to look at your particular site on an aerial photograph, you can get an idea of how many different plant communities there are. You can look at the current land use activities in the area. You can maybe find some disturbed areas, those areas you would tend to look at last after you examine the natural plant communities. You can also locate new water bodies. One thing you have to realize is that when the mapping was produced by the National Wetland Inventory, if you look at the date of that particular image, you may find that for many areas of the country, the data are from the mid-1980s. And that means that there's been, significant changes potentially in some wetlands, and then there's always ponds being built across the landscape. So by looking at the imagery, you would be able to locate new water bodies, new ponds, maybe new reservoirs that have been created. You can also identify some changes in the wetlands themselves, and you can, in some cases, even improve the boundaries, because when you're mapping wetlands at a national level, you're going to have, you're looking at a particular scale, and the scale is usually not sufficient enough for real detailed delineation work that you need for on the ground. But the availability of imagery online allows you then to zoom in, so you can look at wetlands or look at the property in particular at a larger scale and refine boundaries through that type of process. And then just in summary, the off-site method that we're talking about is a preliminary assessment of wetlands in an area based on the existing information. We use map information, we use aerial photographs, so we're looking at National Wetland Inventory maps that are available for the whole country. We're looking at soil survey data that's available for all the country. And in some cases, we may be even looking at state maps, state wetland inventories that have been prepared, and that may be more detailed than the National Wetland Inventory. But we look at the collection of this information before we even go out in the field. It gives us a pretty good idea of, one, the different types of plant communities that are out there, and the different soil properties that we are likely to encounter. So what we'd like to do is, use that information from the various mappers, the wetland mapper for identifying potential wetlands. We'd like to use the web soil survey data to identify potential areas based on their hydric soils. And we'd also like to use that information to identify the soils that we're likely to encounter in the field, and then to be able to look up their characteristics. And again, just to repeat here, in terms of the use of the imagery, it's valuable for updating and refining the data that already exist, and for determining the number of plant communities that we're going to need to evaluate on the particular property based on the existing vegetation, soil properties, and topography. For more information on the National Wetland Inventory and soil mapping, you should contact the appropriate agencies. For the Fish and Wildlife Service, you should contact their regional offices and ask about the National Wetland Inventory maps, because there may be maps as well as other products available of interest in your particular area. For soil mapping, be sure to contact the state office of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Well, today we've given you a brief introduction of the off-site method and how to use some of the tools that are available, the Wetlands Mapper and the Web Soil Survey. Those are the two primary sources of information. And again, you should always consult that information before you go out in the field. Thank you very much. Enjoy your field work.